As we are preparing to write our speeches coming up in this course, you want to think about your introductions and conclusions. These are your roadmap to your speech. This gives your audience an idea of where you're going and what you're doing and when you're going to get there. And the easiest outline of a speech ever is tell us what you're going to tell us. That's your introduction. Tell us, that's the body, and tell us what you told us. That's the conclusion. So let's look at how we can best write and create and compose those introductions and conclusions to have the best effect on our public speaking and our speech and our audience. The purpose of your introduction is fourfold, and these are the four things I'm going to be looking for in your introduction. You're missing these four things, you likely will get some points taken off. So make sure that you are including these four things in your introduction. The absolute first thing you should do is gain our attention and interest. And although we love looking at your face and hearing your voice, you do need to grab our attention somehow and hold that interest. Now, I'm going to talk to you at least 7 ways to do that in a few minutes. Second, you want to reveal the topic. Tell us what you're talking about. Don't assume we can figure it out. Be blunt about it. Tell us what you're talking about. You want to establish credibility and goodwill. And the fourth thing in your introduction is to preview the body of your speech, that what's coming up. Tell us what's coming up in the body. In gaining our attention and interest, these are 7 ways, and I think there are at least a couple more in our textbook online. One is relate to the audience. How can you relate your topic to this audience, right? We're not pretending to be Parliament or Congress. We're just college students. So how can you relate your topic to college students, right? Of varying ages and backgrounds, but how can you relate to this audience? Figure out how to do that. You can state the importance of a topic. So you can tell us maybe a quick statistic on something that this is why this topic is important. You can startle the audience, and no, I don't mean like jumping out and going boo, but give us a startling statistic or give us a startling idea, something to think about. So if you were doing like a speech on, well, I won't tell you the topic, but if you were to say, think of 3 women in your life, who comes to mind first? Your mother, your sister, your daughter, your grandmother, your aunt, your best friend. Now guess which one of those will be sexually assaulted in her lifetime. Yeah, right? So you can startle your audience. And so that leads to a statistic of like 3 in 10 women in their lifetime are sexually assaulted. And so you can startle the audience somehow to kind of gain our attention. You can arouse curiosity. And I always think about Lifetime Achievement Awards when they give out those awards at like the Emmys or the Grammys or the Academy Awards, and they don't tell you who they're talking about. They just say, this person started in radio in 1945 and moved into television in their own sitcom, something like that. And they build anticipation and curiosity about the person until they reveal the topic. You can do that in your introduction as well. So you can arouse curiosity. You can ask a question. Okay, not like polling. Don't like ask for responses. You want it to be a rhetorical question, but you could start out with saying, what would you think if you were sick and went to the doctor and she prescribed that you watch episodes of The Office as part of your treatment? Right? So you're asking a rhetorical question. You don't expect people to answer back. Obviously on video, they aren't going to, but you want to ask a rhetorical question to get your audience thinking, what would that be like? And of course, that'd be a speech on laughter being the best medicine. You can You can begin with a quotation, especially if you're doing a speech about a person. So if you're doing a speech about a person, a great way to start a speech on that person is start with a quotation by that person, or a short poem or something where you can start with a quotation. I have one in my pocket, and I was judging speech competition this past weekend, and I told students this: always have a quote in your pocket that is accurate, you have it memorized, and you know who it's by, and you can use it at any point. I've used this one since high school on the GRE exam. I've used it in public speaking. I've used it for impromptu speeches at Toastmasters. And the quote is, Carl Jung once said, there is no coming to consciousness except through pain. Now, you can connect that speech to most anything that you are like, I've got to get through this struggle to get to something better. That's what that quote's about. So always have a quote in your pocket you can use, especially for impromptu speeches, but it's a great way to start your speech. You can start with a quotation. And another great way is to tell a story. Now, one of the myths of public speaking is always start with a joke. That's one way you could. That's a funny story is good if it's appropriate to the topic. You don't want to start with a joke or funny story and then start talking about cancer survival rates or something. So it needs to be appropriate to the topic of your speech. So I lump in tell a joke with tell a story. I think funny stories are great. If you can be a great storyteller, you can be a great public speaker, because basically it's all about storytelling. And so how can you tell the best story? What's the best story you can tell? Do you have a short one you could tell us about and really gain our interest into your topic? So here are 7 ways to start your speech. This is the very first sentence you should say. One of these 7. Not, hello, my name is, and today I want to tell you about. Because if you start your speech with, hello, my name is, and today I want to tell you about, I will, if we were live, possibly make you start over. Definitely will deduct some points. Here are 7 other options besides hello, my name is, and today I want to tell you about, because that is the most boring way to start a speech. Don't do that. Okay. Start with one of these, then, right? What would you think about your doctor telling you to watch Office episodes? Hi, I'm Lori. Today I'm going to talk to you about laughter being the best medicine. That's where you put that part. Okay. So use one of these attention getters, gain our attention and interest. Then you're going to move into revealing your topic. Now, this may sound very obvious, but please be deliberate about it. I actually have sat through 5 minutes or more sometimes, and I'm going, I don't know what this speech is about. What is the topic of this speech? Don't leave it to your audience to figure it out. Tell them what the topic is. Today, I'm going to tell you about laughter and how laughter can be good for your health and be the best medicine, right? So make sure you reveal the topic to us. Tell us what it is. Then you need to establish credibility and goodwill. Credibility. What is credibility? Credibility is the audience's perception that you know what you're talking about. How are you going to establish credibility on a speech topic you may not know a lot about? What can you say? Well, easily you can say, I have researched this topic extensively over the past few weeks, and today I'd like to tell you about the life and times of Demosthenes. Right? So at minimum, you should tell us you've done a lot of research on the topic, that we can believe you, that you have information you want to share with us. So you can establish your credibility as a speaker. If you're doing a speech on, when we get to informative speeches or persuasive, a topic that you know a lot about, maybe it's a hobby or a cause that you want us to support, tell us why you are credible in that area. I have been playing curling for 10 years now, and I want to tell you about the rules of the game, something like that. So make sure you establish that credibility. And then what is goodwill? No, not store down the street. It is perception by the audience's perception of whether you have the best interest of theirs in mind. Are you trying to sell them a faulty product, or can they trust you? Basically, is goodwill, right? How are you going to establish that you have their best interest in mind? Particularly when we get to persuasive speeches, right? How are you going to say, today I'm going to tell you about an organization I have a lot of affinity for and been supporting, and I'd like for you to support too. And here's what it is, right? So make sure that you explain, especially in persuasive speeches, why the audience should trust you, why you're credible, why you have their best interest in mind. And then it doesn't take a lot to do that, but you want to establish that in your introduction. Okay. So we've gained attention and interest. We've revealed the topic to the audience. We've established our credibility and goodwill. The last piece, and don't forget this one, is to preview your main points. Now, this is different from the internal preview we talked about with transitions in module 2. This is a preview statement. It's in the introduction, and it's telling your audience where you're going. It's like giving a map to your audience, because your audience are kids in the back seat. And what do kids in the back seat want to know? Where are we going, and are we there yet? So give your audience the map. Tell them what you're going to tell them. Today, I'm going to talk to you about the early life of Demosthenes, his education, and his influence on us today. 3 is the magic number. There it is. Okay. Tell us what you're going to tell us. That seems so redundant, but it's so helpful to the audience to know where we're going. Okay. I want one president sometime at some point to give me a preview statement during the State of the Union address, because they never do. The speechwriters never tell you. So tonight, our union is strong, and I'm going to talk to you about domestic policy, security issues, and international affairs. If they would just do that, once we got to international affairs, we would know that we're almost there. Instead, they hold us hostage for like an hour and a half, and we never know when it's going to end. So please don't forget the previous statement. Tell us what you're going to tell us. Now, here's some tips for your introduction. We talked about public speaking math. Please be concise. Your introduction should be 10 to 20% of your total time. So for a 5-minute speech, that's 30 seconds to a minute. It's very short. You're going to get all 4 parts in 30 seconds to a minute for a 5-minute speech. Look for materials while you're doing research. Maybe you'll find a great story about your topic or a great quote. Look for those materials while you're researching your topic. Be creative. How can you best grab our interest? Is there another way you've thought of that can work that is not hello, my name is? Okay. Finalize the introduction after you finalize the body. Now you can write your introduction ahead of time, but make sure after you finish the body of your speech that you go back and make sure it matches so that your main points are actually previewing the correct main points and all of that fits. And then work out the content and delivery in detail. This is where I recommend memorizing. Research shows that if you can memorize your introduction, that 30 seconds to a minute, that at about the 40-second mark, your nervousness and stage fright anxiety decreases significantly. So if you can have it memorized and you can maintain eye contact with your audience, whether it's live in a room or with the camera, and have it memorized and have a great introduction with us, then be able to look at your notes for your body, it's going to significantly decrease your anxiety. So this is where I recommend memorizing your introduction. Okay. All right. You've written the introduction. You've got this fantastic body you're going to tell us about in your speech. And then you get to the end. Then what do? Well, we got to talk about conclusions. And the purpose of the conclusion is to signal the end. This is where you go, hey, kids in the back seat, we're almost there, right? We're just around the corner. Hang on, we're almost there. And then somehow reinforce the central idea. And you can do that in multiple ways. But you want to signal the end to your audience saying, hey, today I've told you about the life and times of Demosthenes and why we still know his name today. Simple as that. Summarize somehow what you've told us and then move on to reinforcing that central idea in some way. That's the purpose of the conclusion. There are a couple ways to do that. First, I want to talk about the content of your conclusion. You can summarize the speech in main points. Make sure you don't go back and repeat too much. Don't just go through and say your speech all over again. Make sure it's just a quick, here's the main points kind of thing. You could end with a quotation, just like you started with a quotation. You could end with a quote. That's always a good idea. You can make a dramatic statement if you'd like to at the end, right? Or a call to action, something you want us to go do for persuasive speeches. You can always refer back to the introduction. And I will tell you, as an audience member, I always like it when a speech refers back to previous content, whether it's in the body or all the way back to the introduction. And it kind of ties it all up in a little bow. And as an audience member, that just feels like it's a complete speech, like it's complete thought. It's come full circle. So maybe, here's a thought, you start a great story in the beginning for your introduction, for your gaining attention. And you don't tell us how the story ends, but then you tell us all about the middle information in your speech. And at the end, you conclude the story. That just comes full circle. That just feels a very complete speech to me as an audience member. So this is the content portion of your conclusion. What are you going to do as the content? Did you start with a quote? Do you want to end with a quote? Did you start with a story? Do you want to end with a story? Did you start with a joke? It was a funny speech and you want to end with the punchline? That could work too. So think about content and what you're going to say at the end. But you also want to think about delivery. And there are a couple of different delivery types. So one's a crescendo ending, and if you're ever in music, you know what a crescendo is. It ends up, right? It builds to intensity. My eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord, right? So Martin Luther King Jr. used that a lot, the crescendo ending. The opposite of that is called the dissolve ending. Why it's not decrescendo, I have no idea. But it's dissolve ending where it fades to a dramatic final statement. Usually with more pausing, slowing down, and then ending. And volume usually comes down too, right? So you can crescendo or you can dissolve. There's several ways you can do the delivery of your conclusion. So think about the content, but also what's the best delivery then to use at the end to signal to your audience that you're coming to an end. Okay. All right, tips for your conclusion. Be brief. Your conclusion is half the time of your introduction. So 5 to 10%. And for a 5-minute speech, we're talking 15 to 30 seconds. It's not a long time. Okay. Look for materials while you're doing research. Maybe you'll find a great story, a fantastic quote you can use. Look for those materials while you're researching. And then conclude with a bang, not a whimper. Don't just go, okay, that's all I have. Because we are like lemmings. We're following you, right? Remember, we're in the back seat. We're following. So if you go off the cliff, we're off with you. So don't do that. And avoid saying thank you. It's not bad to say thank you, but what I do want to warn you about is that you should have a conclusion that your audience knows you're ending. So you shouldn't have to say thank you to signal that you're at the end. It's the one thing I don't like about TED Talks. Everyone goes, thank you. Well, I should know you're ending if you wrote a great conclusion. So you shouldn't have to say thank you to end your speech. Okay. In fact, your audience should be thanking you because you did such a great job. Finalize the body. Finalize your conclusion after you finalize the body. Again, so make sure your intro and conclusion matches the main points of the body. And then work out the content and delivery in detail. Again, memorization is recommended. And take my word for it from experience, you cannot write your conclusion while you're giving your speech. I tried it. It doesn't work. I thought, I've got the introduction, I've got the body, I'll figure out the conclusion as I go. That doesn't work. It's really hard to compose a conclusion while speaking to an audience. So don't try that. That doesn't work so well. Okay. And that brings us to the end of introductions and conclusions. Please let me know if you have questions. Oops, too far. Oops. Please let me know if you have questions about that content.